The 2020 Census Bureau data provided new information on how the country's population is shifting. This is important because it will shape the nation's political landscape for the next decade, as congressional district lines will be drawn based on this data. We have new Hill-HarrisX numbers on the issue. Let's take a look.
The poll found 86% of voters said the redistricting process should be as nonpartisan as possible, including 90% of Republicans, 82% of Democrats, and 86% of independents. Oh, that's kind of interesting. For one, who would say, who are these people that say, nah, let's keep it partisan?
Yeah, that's like a poll result that says 90% of people say good things should happen. Like, no one is going to disagree with that. The issue with redistricting, right, we all, in theory, support the goal of it being nonpartisan, but what we're literally doing is, drawing the maps that are very important for determining who is going to be in Congress, because it's mostly competitive in the primaries. So that is such an inherently important political battle, and we live in such tribalized political times. It's not easy to effectively do it in a nonpartisan way, because everyone is pretty much a partisan. Like, over time, everyone has sorted into the correct categories. If you're conservative, you're on Team Red. If you're a liberal, you're on Team Blue. There's very little overlap. There are no more. In very few cases, conservative, Democrats, liberal, Republicans, everyone is in the right place. Independent voters may say they're independent, but often have very strong partisan leanings when you get down to it, sometimes stronger than actually the people who are even describing themselves as Republicans or Democrats. So it is very, very, very difficult. In fact, it's frankly impossible to do this in a nonpartisan way unless you start getting for really creative solutions, like maybe an algorithm should determine it or something. Just an actual geographic grid or index to population size, something like that. But even that, partisans would find a way to influence the process.
I just think it's interesting that 82% of Democrats were the ones who said, oh, yeah, this should be as nonpartisan as possible. I mean, in the media, what we hear is that it's Republicans who want to gerrymander. And so according to this poll, we have 90% of Republicans saying, no, it should be nonpartisan, and only 82% of Democrats. I mean, who are these 18% that are saying, nah, let's go ahead and make this partisan? Are they saying I think those are, it's mind blowing.
I think that 18% is those are highly engaged voters. Those are people who are on Twitter, they're on Facebook all the time. They're watching this program. They're real kind of political junkies, and they understand that partisan gerrymandering is a part of our politics, and that Democrats are getting beaten on it. And so I think it's interesting that you see that number from Democrats, because it does suggest that there is a tiny bit of appetite, and there's some interest among the core kind of Democratic junkie base that they need to fight back against the Republican effort.
But in part, that's my guess on it. In part, they're getting beaten at it. It's not just that Republicans have rigged the system unfairly. Democrats, to a larger extent, unfortunately for their political chances, sorted themselves into clusters in specific places, into cities. They're disproportionately in a few areas, which, because our system wasn't designed when the founders came up with it to keep Democrats out of power. The Democratic Party didn't even exist. It was, designed to do it in a way where you're giving representation based on geography. Democratic voters, it does not, the fact that they live in a couple highly concentrated areas really hurts them given the way the system is. So the system wasn't designed to be unfair to them. It's unfair given where they've chosen to live and maybe needs reform, but...
Not just that, there's a little bit of a divergence in the approach to politics between Democrats and Republicans, in the sense that, and this goes back to the mugwumps and the early progressives of the early part of the 20th century, where they really believe deeply in a clean process. And so that's why you wind up having a bunch of Democratic-controlled states. They've implemented these independent redistricting commissions, whereas Republicans, when they have trifecta control in a state, they don't do that. And so you wind up with this imbalance that then it sits on top of the imbalance that Robbie discussed.
Yeah. Obviously it's an important issue because I don't think anyone thinks it's ideal that these House races are mostly not competitive in the general election. They're competitive in the primary. So then you have on the Republican side you have a more conservative person running against a less conservative person and maybe winning, because in the primary it's very right of center, and so then that's where the battle's actually taking place, where you're not having an actual clash of Republican versus Democrat. You're having a clash of Republican and other Republican and Democrat and other Democrat, and then it's actually decided, which is not anyone's kind of ideal system, but is sort of the reality we have.
Indeed. But thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.